Very soon the LHC is going to deliver collisions at energies that have never been measured before. In Atlas, the very first component that's reached by these particles is the inner detector. Their tracks, their momentum, and their charge are measured with a high degree of precision. Exactly how is that done? Let's go talk to my colleague Pippa and find out.
The inner detector is the very heart of Atlas. So it's the layers of the detector that are first to see the tracks of charged particles as they emerge from the collision point.
How do you measure all these charged particles?
Well, it's like the whole of Atlas. It's layers. We're trying to wrap around the collision points. So what we do, we have some barrels in the center part, and then to catch the things that fly out forwards or backwards, we have end caps to, like the ends of the can. So it's like a Russian doll of cans.
I see. So the protons, they come together.
Yep, they're coming down a beam pipe through the whole of the middle of the experiment. They collide right at the center, and around there we have the layers of the inner detector. What the inner detector is trying to do is measure the tracks of charged particles, but disturbing them as little as possible. So we have just a few layers of detection apparatus, which the particles can pretty much fly through before they hit the next layer out, which is the calorimeters, and that's where they get stopped.
What types of particles might you see?
Well, the inner detector can only measure charged particles, so those are things like electrons, which have a heavy partner, the muon, so we can measure electrons and muons, and then any sort of charged hadron, we can also measure that, so pions, protons.
So when a charged particle flies through, you take pictures of it, essentially, as it goes through, or what do you do?
Yes, we're measuring all the places where it goes by, so effectively a snapshot of the collision as it happens. But we've got to take 40 million pictures a second.
40 million pictures a second.
The particles are coming around in bunches, so they can pass each other and potentially collide 40 million times a second.
Wow.
And what's more, we've got, in the very center layers, we have pixels, 80 million pixels, so it's like an 80 megapixel camera taking 40 million pictures a second. We have a thing called the trigger, which is trying to decide which are the interesting events. And it has to do that in just a fraction of a second, because we don't have time to keep all that data live. We have to decide very quickly which data we're going to write out to disk. And then once we've written it to disk, we can do a more sophisticated processing and a finer selection to find the most interesting candidate events.
So now you've got all these particles, but these all sound like particles I've heard of. What happens when the Higgs comes through? What are you going to see?
Well, the Higgs doesn't make it out of the beam pipe. The Higgs is a very massive particle, but it's unstable. It decays almost a tiny fraction of a second after it's made. So then the way the Higgs decays depends on quite how heavy the Higgs is.
So the inner detector is like an 80 megapixel camera taking pictures at a rate of about, 40 million per second. Well, that's pretty fast. What's it taking pictures of? Well, the real new physics that we find is going to disappear very quickly. But what we will see are the children, the grandchildren, even the great-grandchildren of the original particles. Where'd you build all of this?
Well, the parts of the detector were made in the laboratories and universities that comprise the Atlas collaboration, so that there are something like 150 institutions. 80 of those contributed to the inner detector, so they maybe made support structures or the pixel modules themselves, or they made the straws for the TRT. These gradually got assembled into larger pieces, which then came to CERN for the final assembly and checking. Now the inner detector, it's right in the center of Atlas. It's really quite hard to get to. It's not quite as bad as launching a satellite. We can get there to repair things, but it took years to cable everything up. So it was very important at each step of the assembly process to do very thorough testing, work out, is this connector really robust? Is it going to last for 10 years in the middle of Atlas, or do we need to maybe add a little clip or something to make sure that things can't fall apart? So this system testing and testing every single connection as we went along was extremely important.
And so 80 institutes from around the world have contributed to the construction of the Atlas inner detector. It's well tested and ready to go.